All right, so today we're going to be talking about articulation on the flute. And for this, I'm just going to use the head joint. Similar to last lesson, we can do a lot of work um, on just the head joint alone before we put the flute together, which eliminates the extra thought process about thinking about fingerings and hand position and making sure we're holding the instrument right and all that. So we're just going to be working on keeping the aperture steady and the embouchure steady while we're manipulating the tongue in order to provide clear articulation. So what is articulation? First of all, articulation is on an instrument is the same as it is in English, right? It's the way that we pronounce things with either clarity or lack of clarity. Right? So if I were to speak English in a very particular and articulate and clearly enunciated way like I am right now, that's one type of articulation. And another type of articulation would be if I were to slur all my words together like this, that would sound different, right? So we can create these different kinds of effects while playing the instrument by using the tongue. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is be able to conceptually have the tongue move independently of the aperture and the embouchure. Okay, so these things we've been focusing on, or you've been focusing on while you're learning flute. We have to be very tight and firm in our position of our embouchure, all these muscles working together to form the embouchure, and the accuracy and shape and size of the aperture, which gives us the right amount of airstream, right? The control over the direction of the airstream, and to get a good sound. Okay, so all those things need to stay constant while we're using the tongue to articulate. Okay, so a lot of beginning flute players think that they have to shape the air inside the mouth with the tongue, and a lot of them end up doing this. Okay, inside. Right. We don't want that. Right. The tongue has to be relaxed. If you think about closing your mouth and not saying anything, think about where the tongue sits. What does it feel like? It sits in the bottom of the mouth, kind of flat. Right? And we want it to maintain that same position when we're playing a long tone, right? So first practice playing a long tone and keeping the tongue relaxed. It may take a couple of tries for you to be able to produce a sound and forget about the aperture and embouchure stuff momentarily so that you can think more consciously about what's happening with the tongue. All right? So now, once you get past that stage and you can play some long tones with the tongue relaxed, we're going to start in with what's called legato articulation. Legato articulation is the type that means each note gets a full value. It lasts for its full length of time, and all the notes are connected only by the articulation. They're not slurred, right? Slurred, it means no articulation whatsoever. One note runs right into the next one, right? So with legato articulation, we're separating the notes just with the tongue without using any space in between the notes, okay? So for legato articulation, again, full value, kind of a mellow, more low-key articulation, I like to use the syllable do. If you say the syllable do, you notice that the tip of the tongue touches the roof of the mouth just beyond the inner edge of the top teeth, like when we say make a D sound when we speak. But we use do because do maintains the basic shape of the embouchure and the aperture that are used to make the sound of the flute, right? So we're thinking of these things independently, but we can match them together in this way by matching the syllable do with the shape of the embouchure and aperture that we're in already to make the sound, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start a long tone on the head joint, and I'm going to just, while I'm playing the long tone, just move my tongue, right? In the same way that we can sing a note, ooh, do, 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 and I would recommend trying that first, right? Then just blow some air through and practice the articulation at the same time. So we do like this. Then we try with the flute. So we don't want to break in the sound. We want there to be no silence. The only time that we hear any interruption in the sound is when, in the moment that the tongue touches the roof of the mouth for the D syllable, and then comes back to normal, right? So it's up and then relaxed, up and relaxed, and it happens kind of fast, so it's kind of like a flicking motion, okay? So spend some time on that and see if you can practice repeating these articulations, these legato articulations, during the course of one breath over a long tone, just like that. Then we move on to the next type of articulation, which we call an accent, right? Which is has this symbol, the greater than symbol, over top of the note, right? And it's a similar sound to the legato, but a little bit more of a pronounced beginning. So instead of do, we're going to think to. And when you say to with a T sound as opposed to do, there's a little extra burst of air there that comes off of the T, even though the tongue is touching in a very similar place in the roof of the mouth as when we say do. But now we have to. It gives a little extra burst of air, which gives us a little bit more of a pronunciation on the front of the note, okay? Again, accents are going to have full value, just like legatos will have full value. The only difference is the very front of the note. So I'll practice this again by singing first. To, and then I'll do it with just air. Then I'll try it with the flute. Again, try that over the course of a long tone, one breath. Try and get as many in there as you can that sound similar to each other. I would also recommend doing this with metronome, maybe at 60 beats per minute, so that you can accurately line up and intentionally move your tongue at a specific time and not just guess and throw it around in there. Again, for the most part, the tongue should be pretty relaxed. Only during the moments of articulation does it move, and then it should settle back to its resting place. Okay? The third type of articulation, and the last type of articulation we're going to talk about today, is staccato. Staccato means short and disconnected. So now we're actually going to have space of silence in between each note, right? So even though we might be at the same tempo at this here, this slow tempo, we're going to hear some silence in between notes, right? Now, the syllable that we're going to use to create the staccato articulation is toot, T-O-O-T, but we're not going to pronounce the T on the second half or the end of the word. We're going to kind of cut off the sound, so it'll be like toot, toot, not toot, right? Because that'll give us two articulation. One, toot, 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 right? So if we're there, we do it with the air, and we say. So here I'm actually letting a burst of air out and then stopping the air at the same time as the tongue goes to reconnect to the top of the mouth, right? So the motion of the tongue would be in slow motion. A down and up. It starts up and then comes down and then goes back up, right? So if we do it with the flute, we get this sound. Okay? This articulation, the staccato, the short and disconnected one, will have the feeling of the most tension in your tongue of any of the ones that we've done so far. Okay? But in general, try to move your tongue as little as possible. And I think the trickiest part about this is getting control over the idea that we can move the tongue independently of the embouchure and the aperture. They should be able to move without affecting one another. Okay? So getting over that mental hump is the first order of business, and try and replicate the sounds that I created through these three different type of articulations that I did here today. Again, the first one, legato articulation, full value, mellow, and connected. The second one was accented, which is full value, but with a more pronounced beginning or start to the note. And the third is the staccato, which is short and disconnected. Okay? So if you can work through all three of those, then apply them to your scales, apply them to any music that you're working on as an exercise in controlling different types of articulation.